Go for it.
Welcome, everybody. Another episode of the Transform Your Birth podcast. And today I have the lovely Sarah. Sarah's got a little boy called Xavier who's 18 months old, and Sarah's going to share with us her birth story. So, Sarah, just tell us a little bit about your pregnancy and what sort of prep you did.
Yeah, so thanks, Tracy. Hello. Excited to be on and sharing my story with everybody. So we were fortunate that we had a very straightforward pregnancy. It was all kind of, Xavier was doing everything that he should be doing, growing at the rate he should have been. It was sort of textbook and rather boring from a medical perspective. In the lead up to the due date, just do lots of nesting, obsessively cleaning out everything, lots of walks, lots of date eating, raspberry leaf tea drinking, lots of relaxing, all the oxytocin building things.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of convinced, because everything had been so textbook, that Xavier would arrive on his due date, but that came and went. So we had another nice relaxing week at home. And we had a post-dates appointment at 41 weeks gestation. And at that point, they had a little look and did an examination and found that I hadn't really started dilating, Xavier hadn't engaged at all, and that my cervix was still quite long. So they recommended at that point that we come in for an induction a couple of days later.
So when you heard that word induction, how was that? Can you tune into how you were feeling with that?
Yeah, I think I was disappointed, I think, that it was like, oh, come on. I was so convinced that it would have happened by that point. I think I was quite nervous about being induced. It hadn't been in my plan. And I didn't really sort of understand exactly how the process worked. I didn't really know exactly what I was stepping into until the following day. We had a wonderful chat with our student midwife who kind of talked us through the process. We were kind of in a space where we thought, look, we'll see what happens, see what kind of occurs over the weekend, and kind of could make another decision on Monday. Had sort of accepted that, it might be necessary, given that Xavier hadn't engaged, to sort of move things on a little bit. And I think by the end of the evening, when we got home, sort of felt, quite accepting of it, and sort of comfortable with that decision.
So with that decision and discovering what the process involved and how that was for you, were there any other little mental shifts that you had to do when it came to really stepping fully into that decision?
Yeah, so I think understanding a bit more about the process helped me a lot. So a lovely midwife explained that we'd sort of been told that they'd insert the cervidil, so the tape that sort of sits up against your cervix to help it dilate, and that the following morning they'd break my waters. But what hadn't been fully explained was that when they broke my waters, they would also typically start the synto drip at the same time. And I really wanted to avoid that if possible. So kind of after that chat, we had a bit of a plan in place where that we'd go in on Monday for the scheduled induction and see what progress had been made, and felt quite comfortable within ourselves. If I'd made some decent progress, if Xavier had engaged, if I'd started dilating, that we'd push back on that and say, look, let's give it another day and see what else happens. As it was, that progress wasn't made, but we were quite comfortable with then sort of pushing back on the next step. So we'd had a chat when they were ready to insert the cervidil, just to say, look, can we reassess in the morning before we break my waters and see what progress has been made? And if I'm, dilating or have dilated a significant amount, can we leave that till later in the day? And if it's the decision to break the waters, then I didn't want the drip to start at the same time. And had discussed with the team that, look, okay, if we need to go to do that next step, but I really don't want to do the drip unless no progress is made with the waters being broken. And the impression I got was sort of, you're going to need it, but sure, if you want to wait, you can do that.
So I'm curious about that. Exercising that level of decision making and to recognise with induction there are sort of three stages. The first is the ripening agent of the cervix. The second is breaking of the waters. And then the third is the syntocinon drip. Now, labour can start just with the first one, or sometimes which is the ripening agent, or the ripening agent and the breaking of the waters. And so exercising a little bit of patience and waiting can be a really useful thing, because that might be enough to kick off labour, and that might be all you need. Now, that's not to say that, you know, sometimes we do need a bit of extra help with the drip to get things going. How did you know to ask and negotiate that type of approach to the induction?
A lot of that was from our student midwife, who was an absolute blessing. She was kind of our continuous person throughout the whole journey, and was worth her weight in absolute gold. So she was great with us. Yeah, she's a big advocate for physiological birth, and so said, look, you know, you make the decision that's right for you, but sort of here's the steps that it would take, and, you know, here are the sort of different points where you might want to make a different decision. So
and you felt confident doing that?
Yeah, I felt really confident doing that. Mario, my partner, was a great support with that as well. We were sort of both on the same page of, look, we'd like things to happen with as little intervention as possible, but also sort of comfortable accepting that intervention if it was indicated.
Yeah. Were there any other things you negotiated with your induction, like movement or?
Well, it's all happened rather quickly. Before we get into that, I might mention we had quite a lovely chat on the morning of the induction, Tracy. I think you remember. I kind of called for my pep talk, and you had the beautiful point of sort of trying to have the mindset of welcoming, if it got to the syntocinon and the cervical, just sort of welcoming that into my body rather than fighting against it. And that was quite a mindset shift for me as well. Just sort of, okay, well, if it's not something that sort of I'm being put through or that's happening to me, I'm accepting this as, you know, another way that we're going to bring our baby into the world. So that also helped us feel a bit more comfortable with that.
Often when I am coaching people going through induction, it is one of the things that once, you know, I get them to explore their thoughts around it, the decision making, what the options are, and then they make that decision, I encourage them to step fully into that decision and to own it, so that when you go in not with this, oh, I really didn't want to do this, but to go in with a mindset of, right, bring it on. I want to meet my baby, and welcoming anything that you take into your body as a part of the process of welcoming this baby. So,
and I think by the time we arrived at hospital, we were very much sort of in that mindset of like, all right, it's go time, like bring it on.
Yeah. And you felt that way? You felt really
we did.
Cool.
So it was on a Monday, and we're like, all right, like prepped that this could take a few days, but, you know, by Thursday probably we'll have a baby.
Nice.
Quite exciting.
Nice. Yeah. And what sort of monitoring did you negotiate?
I didn't have much time to negotiate it, to
be honest,
because it all happened quite quickly once it kicked off. So when we went in for the induction, they hooked me up to the CTG and was like, you know, hang out here for 20 minutes and we'll see what happens. And then they inserted the cervidil a little while later, and put me on the monitor again just to sort of see how everything was settling. And then I walked down to the births, like the postnatal ward, which was where we were going to sort of hang out for the evening. And they sort of said, you know, make yourself comfortable and relax. And so I'd sort of discussed at that point what my options were with monitoring, and said, you know, we wanted to be as mobile as possible. But it was, explained because it was an induction that they'd need to keep the CTG on once things sort of kicked off. So, it was just kind of made it clear that I'd like to be as mobile as possible. And they said they were kind of quite happy to accommodate that and would move to the little scout monitor if they felt that was tricky. So I felt that was okay.
So tell us how it unfolded.
So, got down to the ward. I'd kind of prepped myself that, you know, we just try and bank as much sleep and be as relaxed as possible, waiting for my waters to be broken in the morning. And probably about an hour after we got to the ward, would have been about 8 o'clock at night, just started feeling what I thought might have been contractions. You know, we'd taken some lasagna in, so we sat down and had some lasagna, played a few hands of cards. It was like, oh, these are getting a little bit more intense. And then, a bit before 9, they really started developing more of a wave-like pattern where they sort of came on and built and then went away. And I was like, okay, this might be the start of something. So I just made myself nice and comfy on the bed. I think I plugged into some of the meditation practices and just zen out for a little while. And about half an hour after that, I think, I kept reading about the pop and the gush when I was reading birth stories beforehand with waters breaking. And I was like, okay, that's exactly what's happened. There was a popping sort of sensation, and then realized that my waters are broken. So Mario went off.
So they broke spontaneously?
Yeah, broke spontaneously.
Ah, interesting.
A little under 2 hours after the cervidil was inserted. So broke spontaneously. The midwife came in and sort of confirmed that was what had happened. And at that point, they hooked me up to the CTG again and said, look, we'll leave this on for 20, 30 minutes, just see what's happening, and go from there. So I kind of got onto the bed and made myself comfortable. I think I had in my mind that it would take quite a period of time. So just thought I'd try and sleep through as much of it as possible. Didn't happen. So once my waters broke, the contractions built in intensity quite quickly. So sort of within about 20, 30 minutes, they were coming sort of every couple of minutes and lasting a good 30 seconds to a minute each time, and just slowly building in a bit more intensity. And sort of the 30 minutes or so that I was going to be monitored sort of came and went. And as things sort of started to pick up a little bit more, I thought this might actually be kicking off. I was like, I hope this isn't kicking off, because it was feeling a fair bit quite intense by that point. I'd opted to take in a TENS machine just for a bit of pain relief, so put that on at that point, which was a nice distraction, and had the labour dance meditation going. So I was just trying to relax through things as much as possible, which helped.
Tell me about the TENS machine. How did that work for you?
I found it useful in that it gave me something else to focus on during the surge. So I was like, okay, that had like a little boost function, so I could feel it kind of ramping up in intensity as the contraction went. So for me, I found it as sort of a useful distraction from the intensity of the contraction.
Did it change the contractions?
I don't feel it changed the contractions themselves, just my, I think, perception of how intense they were. And I think by having something else to focus on other than what, I was feeling in my back and my abdomen and in my thighs, because it kind of got quite intense there for me as well. It was just sort of another focus point for me. So
I think it's interesting how different tools can work with women and with their mind, and anything that can distract you from what it is that you're going through can be very, very helpful. So whether it was shifting or dialing down the intensity of the sensations, or whether it was just taking your mind somewhere that made it more manageable, who cares? It worked.
Yeah, that's it. It was a placebo. It worked for me.
Good stuff.
So I used that for a little bit longer, and then things got quite intense. And with the monitors on, I couldn't move that much. Just sort of said to Mary, look, I need to be off this bed now. I need to move. Like, I think things are picking up, and I'd like to be a bit more mobile. So he went to find the midwives. And I think the impression that he got and I got was that they weren't expecting that I would have progressed as quickly as I did. So I think they were sort of in the middle of handover and said, we'll be there soon, sort of, don't worry. And so I came back, and we did a bit more breath work and wrote out a few more. And then I was like, no, you need to go find someone now. Like, go be off, come back with people. So he went and sort of found someone's like, you really need to come now. We need to be moving, please. So they kind of came in and took one look at me and was like, yep, let's get you down to the birth suite.
So you were still in postnatal at this point?
Yeah, I was still just down on the postnatal ward labouring away, right. Which was fine. It was quite comfortable. So things had got fairly intense by that point. I was sort of having a contraction every couple of minutes that were lasting about a minute by that point. So I think by that point I was just in a t-shirt and undies. I think Mario was shoeless and was just strolling down towards the suite, hanging on to Mario and hanging onto the machine as we went. So I think I had about 3 or 4 contractions on the way down to the birth suite rooms. So I got in. I was lucky enough that one of the rooms with the big bath was free. So Mario set about filling that up for me, because I was quite keen to labour in the water if I could. And they wanted to do a vaginal examination at that point just to see where I was at, which I was quite curious to see at where I was at that point. So I jumped up on the bed, took a couple of contractions just to feel like feel I'd sort of settled into that space. At that point, I opted to use the gas and air just for a little bit of extra relief to take the edge off, which I found quite helpful. So I had a couple of contractions using that. And at that point, I felt ready to sort of be on my back in the position that they needed me to be in for the vaginal examination. I found at that point that I was 5 centimeters dilated, so things had progressed rather quickly. Yeah, so by that point, the bath was full, so jumped in there, which felt amazing. I was eager to use the gas and air still, but the one they had by the pool was a portable one, which didn't work as freely with my breath. I found the one that was sort of hooked up to the wall, I could just focus on my breathing quite naturally, just with the gas and air thing in my mouth, whereas the one in the pool, I had to kind of take it out on the breath out, and it was just too much to sort of focus on with my my breathing as well. So it was hindering rather than helping. So I gave that away at that point.
Can you just go into a little bit more detail about the gas? It's something years ago when I was a doula, we used to give women the gas through a nose piece.
Yep.
And then they turned it into a mouthpiece. And what I noticed is women didn't look as relaxed on the mouthpiece. And of course, being a breathing retrainer and educator, mouth breathing creates a very different response in the nervous system to nose breathing. Nose breathing creates more of a relaxation response, whereas mouth breathing, when you're sucking something in through the mouth, it actually puts the nervous system on alert. It's more of a hyper alert adrenaline response. And so often women now, particularly if they've learned to breathe calmly through, learning the power of breath in birth and how it shifts so many physiological functions in the body, because it's, the way we breathe influences everything. And one of the biggest things that influences in birth is blood and oxygen supply to the uterus. And so getting the most oxygen requires us not to overbreathe, and mouth breathing can cause overbreathing or hyperventilation. So, in my observation, Sarah, I've noticed that women tend to look more stressed on the gas than what they used to, and it tends to interfere with their breathing, particularly if they are nose breathing with their mouths closed. So can you share how that worked for you? Because I have had women come back and say, oh no, the gas was really good. What was the difference?
I found it helpful. And I don't think I had it in sort of continuously. So I would take kind of a few breaths in and out with that and then sort of let it subside.
Right.
Tended to use it with the peak of each contraction. So kind of as that intensity built, I'd use the gas and air and take some breaths with that. And then in between contractions, tried to focus more on that sort of relaxed breathing, just trying to get sort of things back into the green.
And what did the gas feel like it was doing for you?
It's hard to say. I think it's a little bit like the TENS, like it didn't take away the full intensity of it. I feel like it probably took the edge off. And I think similarly to the TENS, it gave me something else to focus on, because there was a noise with the whistle in and whistle out that sticks in my head. Almost focusing on that noise with something else for me to sort of fixate on.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, and then, I was quite mindful, just trying to get back into as relaxed a state as possible in between contractions at that point. So felt certainly in the early part that I was able to manage that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you were getting towards the end. You had the vaginal examination. You're 5 centimeters. I bet that was good news.
So yes. I was kind of mentally prepped for maybe I'll just be a couple and this will be like, okay, this is going to get fairly full on, but I was like, okay, 5 centimeters, so maybe we can manage some more of this.
This is good. Yeah, this is progress. You were in the bath.
Was in the bath. That felt really good. And then I've been in for maybe 10, 15 minutes and then started to feel at the top of each contraction kind of pushy. I was like, there was just a definite urge to sort of push with the top of each contraction. And I mentioned that to the midwife. It was like, oh, look, it's not time to push yet. Like, try not to do that. And interestingly, it's one of my good friends who'd given birth about a month before me had a similar experience and that had felt an urge to push quite soon on. I think she was 6 or 7 centimeters dilated at the time, and they'd done all sorts of spinning babies things with her to get her inverted to stop things, to take sort of the pressure of bub away from the cervix while she continued to dilate. And it was such a positive story, but that sort of stuck in my mind. It was like, oh yeah, you can feel like you need to push before you're ready to push. So it was, I think I got into my head a bit with that as well, and was like, okay, like it's not time. I've got to almost try to stop this from happening at this point, which I don't sort of look back with regret at this point, but I'm curious if I had my time again and just sort of rolled with that, how things might have unfolded. So the next sort of half hour or so, I was sort of felt increasingly like I needed to push with each contraction. It was like, all right, like try not to do this. And that in turn sort of made me a little bit more anxious, which I'm sure then increased that intensity of each contraction where I felt the urge to push. So it sort of became a bit of a cycle then when things got a bit more intense and I got quite anxious that I couldn't stop myself from pushing when it wasn't time to push. So kind of spent a bit of time getting in and out of the bath. I was like, well, if I'm not ready to push, maybe I need to do a poo. So I sat on the toilet for a while and still couldn't sort of stop that sensation from happening. And I think in hindsight, this was probably the transition period for me. I was like, this is getting too intense. If I'm not ready to push, and like if it's not the time to do that and I can't stop my body from doing this, then I'm going to need something to sort of take the edge off this intensity. So decided at that point that I'd opt for the saline injections into my lower back because I was feeling things quite intensely in that area at that point. And had said to Mario, look, I'm giving this half an hour. If this is no better after the injections, then you're signing me up for an epidural. Like I kind of had in my head, if I can't feel the urge to push, then that'll be fine. I can just wait for my body to do its thing. And when it's time, we can go. Which, looking back was very much a transition moment for me. But
do you think you were actually ready to push when you were getting
so,
that? Yeah.
Because the sensation didn't change at all for me once I was determined to be at 10 centimetres. So at that point, because I was moving around so much, they were having difficulty getting a reliable trace on the monitor and said, well, look, if we're going to put the injections in, would you be happy to come up and we can put the little scalp monitor on Bub's head so that we've got a reliable sort of trace of what he's up to. And then while you're there, we can we can do the injection. So that sounded fine to me. So made my way over to the bed slowly with a few more contractions. And when they went to put the monitor on Bub's head, found Bub's head was right there. And I was 10 centimetres dilated and ready to go. So that was, I think there was an hour between the two examinations. And I suspect, that had they done an examination when I first felt the urge to push, they would have found me, if not dilated, then fairly close to it. So
look, it's a tricky thing because women, depending on, how heavy the baby is and it can trigger that, what we call the reflex in the vagina, which gives you that need to sort of, bear down. And some women do get a little bit pushy before the doorways open, but then the question is that still okay? Because we do so many vaginal examinations, it can influence our perspective around how far progressed a woman is. And I hear this often, particularly from people who do my course, because they're very relaxed. They've trained themselves to relax. And so midwives don't always believe they're as far progressed as what they ultimately are. And that can actually be they can be misread in terms of where they're up to in their labour. But if you've had a vaginal examination, then an hour later saying that you're pushing, and because you're a first-time mother, they tend to think that's going to take a long time. But in my experience, it doesn't always take a long time. In fact, it's interesting, dilation and the rate of opening of the door is not a linear process. And this is a concept people need to really understand. Labour doesn't start at 0 centimetres and finish at 10. It actually starts before 0. So the first lot of your contractions when you're a first-time parent is to thin out the cervix, and that can take a lot of contractions to do that. So you can be in labour for hours and not appear to be progressing, but the part of that labour is actually thinning out the cervix. and the body doesn't have a memory of thinning out, and therefore it can take a lot of contractions to do it. But once the doors open, and particularly if you've got a baby pushing on the door, like if they're really low down by then, once the door starts to give, and it might be 4, 5, 6 centimetres, you can go from 6 to 10 very, very quickly. So the point I want to make for those listening is that whatever it's taken you to do the first few centimetres has absolutely no bearing on what it's going to take to do the rest, because it's not 1 centimetre per hour. And so because we do a lot of vaginal examinations and we come out with these numbers, and these numbers, well, one, they can actually encourage women, which is always good news if it does, but it can also discourage women because they get a little bit caught up in the idea that, oh gosh, I'm only 3 centimetres, I've got such a long way to go. And when women get into that mind state, how much longer do I have to keep going? That's what sets up it's almost like they're digging themselves a hole.
And I would have dug myself that hole. Like, had they not said you were 10 centimetres, I would have wanted to know, while you're there, can you let me know what progress has been made? And if they'd told me I was still 5 centimetres after the hour that I had, I would have found that really disheartening.
Absolutely. That's a great comment. I mean, I'm a bit of a hypocrite saying, you know, don't always sign up to vaginal examinations because they can get in the way of your mind. But having said that, I was a little bit goals oriented too, and I'd say get in there and have a look. But I always got the number that encouraged me, which was always a good thing. But sometimes it can really put women off just being in the moment and being in this contraction right here, right now. It doesn't matter how many you've done, and it doesn't matter how many you've got to go, because nobody knows how many you've got to go. That's the mystery. Step into the mystery and just trust in your body. So that's beautiful. Let's come back to your story now. So when you discovered, after putting the scalp monitor on, that you're fully dilated, what happened then?
So it was like, all right, well, now you may push. I was
Thanks for that.
Cheers.
I kind of knew.
And they'd sort of said, you know, do you want to get back in the bath? But despite it being, you know, 2 meters away or whatever it was, it felt like a kilometer. I was like, you know what, I'm good here. So I spent, I don't know how long, sort of in on my knees or all fours, sort of draped over the edge of the bed, which I found worked quite well to begin with, but I got quite fatigued. And I think I left this bit out of the story. When my waters broke, I think just the shock of it made me throw up everything that I'd eaten. So I was kind of going into labour with not that much energy reserve, sadly. And it all kind of had happened so quickly that all of our nutritious labour snacks were still in the bag back on the wards.
No time to eat now.
All of our aromatherapy gear and our carefully curated playlist and all the fairy lights and things that just stayed there. So I found that my legs were getting quite shaky and just was struggling sort of physically to sort of maintain those positions. We tried, I think, a little bit of squatting on the floor, which wasn't particularly effective. So actually ended up on my back for a couple, and despite I could just in my back of mind, this is a terrible position to be pushing in, but it actually, for me, I found it quite effective, and then I actually felt I was able to get a little bit more oomph with each contraction in that position.
Tell me about that. Tell me more about why do you think that happened?
I think just because I didn't have to use my legs so much. So I had them sort of pulled up towards my chest. I was like, if I can make this as close to like a squatting position as possible, just to make things open as possible. So Mario was sort of helping me keep my legs tucked in.
And what were you levering on? Like, what were you holding on to as you bed down?
I was holding on to my thighs as well.
Right.
So kind of holding onto the back of my legs and pulling them in. And then Mario was helping to support my legs there. So I tried that position for a while, which gave my legs a break. And I was like, no, I need to be back in all fours or a kneeling or in a better position, but kind of got back in there and just felt that I lost some momentum with my pushes in those positions, which I found quite odd because it sort of went against everything that I'd read. But just didn't feel like I was making the same sort of progress with each push, with each contraction. So ended up back on my back and sort of alternated between positions for a little while. And then I think I've been pushing for a bit over an hour, maybe, so on and off. And I was unaware of this. I was kind of in the zone by that point, but Mario was sort of aware that, you know, the monitor was turned away from him, and there was a little bit of kind of subdued conversations around the monitor. And then one of the midwives said, "Oh, look, I'm showing some signs of distress. We'd like to get one of the obstetricians in just to sort of have a look." So it's like, fine by that point, do what you will. So yeah, he arrived shortly thereafter and kind of had a look and said, "Look, I think we might need to do an episiotomy and use forceps to bring baby." And I really wanted to avoid forceps. It was not something that I wanted to have part of Xavier's delivery if I could avoid it. And so we decided, look, if we could monitor the contractions for a couple and just sort of see what happened, and go from there. So he did that, sort of watched me through a few contractions. I assume watched what the monitor did, was sort of unaware of that part of the process. And at that point he said, "Look, I would like to do an episiotomy. We'll see how that goes for a few contractions, and then we can rediscuss the forceps if we haven't made any progress." And I think the mention of forceps unlocked some the last skerrick of energy that I had, because there was a renewed effort with each push. And yeah, they put the local injections in, did the episiotomy, and I think a couple of pushes later, Xavier arrived.
Oh wow! Tell me about that moment, Sarah.
That was wonderful. Yeah, it was very surreal. I think shortly before they did the episiotomy, they said, he's very close. If you reach down, you'll be able to feel his hair, and just that moment of like, this is just weird. Of my baby's almost here, but he's not. But I can feel that he's got a heap of hair. Like, yeah, it was very surreal. And then with the episiotomy, it just felt there was an immediate reduction in the amount of sort of pressure I felt that I was working against with each contraction. So there was a pop's not quite the right word, but a definite moment when his head was born. And then the following contraction, he was up on my chest.
So
which is just I think a relief. And it'd be just a beautiful moment of watching Mario's face as he met him. And I think I was a bit off my face from the gas and air, so I was just tripping completely about the hair he had and how long his nails were. I look back on the video and I was like, whoa, look at his nails.
Oh, that's lovely. Did you feel the episiotomy?
No.
A lot of women have a big mental block around procedures like that, and I can certainly understand, as well as caring. And I can pretty much guarantee, I don't know if I can put a number on it, but I'd say 98% of women typically don't feel it at the time, and they don't feel tearing either. It's afterwards that, you tend to get that sensation, but at the time, and also there's a lot bigger things going on.
Yeah, that's the last thing on my mind at that point.
It kind of is, isn't it? Yeah. Is that what you found? Did you?
Very much, yeah. And I'd sort of resigned myself that I would probably have a tear of some degree, given that it was first bub. Had hoped that maybe an episiotomy wouldn't happen, I think I also was going in a little bit anxious as to how that would feel when it was done, but it was, I didn't even notice it happen. Was a little bit more tender after the fact when they were suturing it up, but I was able to sort of express that I could feel a little bit more pain there, and they put a bit more local in, and then it was fine. So
yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think that can be reassuring for a lot of women, because we often it's hard to get your head around the idea of something going on like that in your sacred cave, girls. So the just the reassurance that at the time it really is the last thing you're thinking about it, and you rarely feel it. I don't think I've ever really heard any woman who said that she could feel it at the time. Or if she did feel it, it wasn't any real, it might have been a slight distinction from an already very stretched part of the body. There's sort of pressure there. So Yeah, and every woman experiences that second stage slightly different. So don't ever get caught up in the idea of it's got to feel. People will give, and I won't even say the words that they often say, but they'll give you ideas about what second stage and pushing a baby feels like. And I've heard women describe it and shook my head and thought, well, I've had 4 babies and I don't recall feeling any of them like that. So it's not always what people say, and I would encourage you to just trust in your own body and in your own capacity to release that baby. And if there is a little bit of tearing or that you need to have an episiotomy, then just trust in your body's ability to heal. It heals all the time. You cut a finger and it heals. And we're very fortunate. We've got great health professionals who can help pull those fibers together and help them heal generally in a very, very positive way, with not too much more fuss. So that's awesome.
As a side bit, and edit this out if you'd like. I had a little bit of difficulty with the healing, and one of my girlfriends who'd given birth earlier in the year said, make sure you have if you have a tear or you have an episiotomy, make sure you look at what that looks like early on so that you can see if there's a change. And so I took that advice and sort of sussed it out fairly early on. And I actually had some difficulty with the healing. I think because there'd been a bit of swelling behind the wound. It didn't knit together as well as it ought to have and ended up with some infection.
Right.
So yeah, a week or 2 down the track, I was able to be like, this doesn't look like it looked like a week ago. And so was able to get that sort of managed.
That's really good advice, Sarah. Yeah. So what happened? Just tell. So you had to go back, and then what happened? The way it was
explained to me was that just because of the pressure of Xavier's head being there for a while, whilst I was pushing without kind of the last bit before the episiotomy happened, there was quite a lot of build-up of fluid underneath the skin of my perineum. And then when everything was sort of sutured back together after the episiotomy, that fluid sort of had nowhere to go.
Right.
And so the fluid that was sort of trapped underneath the incision then got infected. So I went back into into the hospital a week, I think, postpartum, maybe 10 days. And they had a look and said, I think you've got an infection. Started me on a course of antibiotics and needed a couple of different courses of antibiotics just to get it 100%. Which was a bit of fun for them, for Xavier, that then inherited the antibiotics. So an interesting first couple of weeks from a tummy perspective, but was fine after that, and it's all healed up just fine. So.
Did you need any extra surgery for it?
No, no. The midwife
really dealing with the infection
was worried, that they might need to sort of redo it and then sort of stitch it back up again, which I was not looking forward to. They really try and avoid that unless things are particularly dire. So said, look, we'll manage it with antibiotics, and if that doesn't work, then can look at other options. But said in the vast majority of cases, when it happens, antibiotics are all you need. So.
Interesting. So if you knew you were signing up for that, Sarah, how would you?
That was almost the worst bit, I think. It was just that healing period afterwards, because I couldn't find a comfortable position. Because it was difficult to sort of sit or stand. And then side lying was comfortable, but I couldn't get feeding worked out and side lying. So it was I was a bit of a hot mess for the first couple of weeks, which I think is probably standard for any mum, regardless of what happens. So.
Look, it's one of those things, we hear these stories and we think, oh God, that'd be awful, and I hope that doesn't happen to me. And we get a little bit caught up in the story and not enough really understanding of just how incredibly resilient women are.
100%.
And what we can go through. And if you knew what you were signing up for at the beginning of the ride, you might get off the bus, say, I don't think I'll be a mother. That looks too hard. And certainly parenting's like that too. There are days you'd love to get off the bus, but it's a life sentence. You're completely committed to these children, and and we can focus on those hard bits and draw meaning to those hard bits that, oh, that's awful, and why would you put yourself through that, and rah, rah, rah. But really what we have to be focusing on is just the idea of being so impressed with what women go through and still love their babies and still want to be mothers and still want to get up to them 2 or 3 times a night.
And in a way, it was almost like the silver lining of it was that because I wasn't really that mobile,
Yeah.
I had to stay and rest. So,
yeah.
Which was like, I just, hung out with Save on the couch, skin to skin. And I feel I probably would have put a bit more pressure on myself to be like, right, come on, it's time for another walk around the block. Like, let's get moving and get some fresh air. But that wasn't something I was kind of up to. So I just had lots of lovely time inside, cuddling up and resting, and could tell people like I'm not really up for company, thanks very much. And yeah, so it was a lovely excuse to be a hermit.
Yeah. Which when you're learning about your baby in those early days
was important. So
is important that you're not too overwhelmed by people coming into your space, because there's so much happening with your body, you're feeding the baby. It's a huge learning curve. Wow. That is a really interesting story. Now, well, let me ask you this. What did you learn about yourself, Sarah?
I think I hadn't realised, and I think particularly towards the end of the labour, just the extra levels of strength that I was able to access, and that's been something I've been able to look and reflect on when things have been particularly, challenging over the last 18 months. Like, look, I was able to get through that, and I thought I'd sort of reached, the end of my tether, and had no energy left, and then was able to kind of find that extra bit of gas. So
nothing like the thread of forceps to do that.
Exactly. Yeah, I just have to think forceps, and I can get up another time in the night. It's a load of watching on. So I think just knowing that there's that extra level that I can unlock within myself has been quite a
beautiful.
Lovely.
And has that been useful for parenting?
Yeah, I think so.
You're damn right.
I can go into my Zen cave. Mario foolishly at the end said, "You now get to win any argument," after watching you go through that. So I've been able to pull that one out of the bag a few times too, which has been good.
Was he impressed?
He was, yeah. And that was one of the beautiful moments for me during our labour, was just watching kind of Mario watch me sort of move in and out of that Zen state, and seeing him being quite stoked that I was managing as well as I was. So it was beautiful.
That's beautiful. That's really lovely. And what would you share with a pregnant woman about birth?
I think, given the experience that I had, I would say just trust what your body is telling you to do. Because I'm curious if I had gone through and just sort of like, I'm not going to listen to what you say, lovely midwife, and I just rolled with that sort of urge to start pushing, whether it would have been a slightly more chill, probably even quicker entry into the world, who knows. But I think just listening to what your body is telling you, and knowing that you've got that extra level you can unlock when you need to, that you'll find that when you need it.
Yeah, that's so true, isn't it? And that's the exact story of parenting right there. Just when you think you're at the end of your tether, you go another mile and then another mile, and you have to rise up and rise up again. We are so much more than what we think we are. That's beautiful. So much wisdom in your story, Sarah. Thank you so much. I think from the place of making decisions around induction, negotiating induction, I love the way you were able to get your head around, what sort of negotiations you could do around that, from, not rushing into the 3 processes of induction, but just letting things unfold and then make decisions as you go, to being able to move through your labour and negotiate the ability to move. You gave us some great little hints there on the use of the gas and the breathing and the TENS machine. And that's, they're all tools in the toolkit. And, the thing about tools in the toolkit, you're just never quite sure which ones are going to work and which ones aren't. But I think just the knowledge of having a toolkit and having options to find comfort can give us a lot of reassurance that we can do this. And we don't always need the epidural. Epidurals have their place, but most of the time we don't need them. Actually, most women don't realise that, but most of the time we don't need them. But they can be useful under certain circumstances. And then the pushing stage and your recovery afterwards, I think there's a powerful message there in not resisting anything about birth, just trusting in your body, to and yourself to get through tricky situations, tough situations, and that the body heals. And even if we need a bit of extra help like you did with antibiotics, we still get through that, and we're much bigger than what we think. So I really appreciate you sharing your story, Sarah. You've been very generous with the details. It's been wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think between what we've discussed today, that's covered it all. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Good luck to all the mums listening. You've got this.
You've got this. I love it. Exactly. You're a woman. You got this.
You go, Mama.
Thanks again, Sarah.
Thanks, Tracy. Cheers.